You're listening to Dodge Movie Podcast. Your hosts are Christy and Mike Dodge, the founders of Dodge Media Productions. We produce films and podcasts, so this is a podcast about films. Join them as they share their passion for filmmaking.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Dodge Movie Podcast. In this episode, we are going to talk about The Spanish Prisoner. It came out in 1997. It was written and directed by David Mamet and starred Campbell Scott, Ben Gazzara, Rebecca Pidgeon, Steve Martin, Rick J., and a young Felicity Huffman. The DP was Gabriel Bernstein, who is known for... The DP is Gabriel Bernstein, who also did the 2008 Iron Man, the 2014 Guardians of the Galaxy, The Suicide Squad, and Thor Ragnarok. Do you sense a theme?
Yeah, but this is not a superhero film.
It is far from a superhero film. The synopsis for this film is: an employee of a corporation with a lucrative secret process is tempted to betray it, but there's more to it than that. The tagline for this film, I have 4 taglines for you and Udo to choose from.
4.
Who can you trust with $1 billion idea?
Not good.
Okay. Not since The Firm has one movie had you trusting so few and guessing so much.
Guessing so much, definitely, but yeah, not feeling it.
Can you really trust anyone?
Delightful, but that has nothing to do with the film.
And lastly, it's the oldest con in the book.
Okay, that is closer to advertising the film.
Absolutely.
Although I will say that it's not a con, it's a heist. Because they don't trick him into giving him the process, they just steal it from him. So it's not a con.
The process. So let's kick it off with your pickup line and then let's get into the process.
The pickup line is, what is the purpose of your trip, please? Not bad, right?
Well, like the movie, it's a little like vague and...
Right. Well, he's taking a trip to some island in the Caribbean.
Yes. And
plot-wise, the purpose of the trip is to introduce him to Jimmy. So, right, kind of tracks a little.
Right. So that first scene, we hear a lot about the process.
Oh my gosh. It was... okay, so I think Mamet knows his way around a typewriter, but... They said the process so much, it was almost like it was a joke on whose line is it anyway.
I know. I wanted the counter that it sometimes
at the bottom of the screen.
Mm-hmm. How many times does he say, or how many times does anyone say the process?
But the pronoun it is easier to type than the process and sounds more natural. So they kept saying the process so often, it really took me out of the film.
Yeah. Is Mamet known for like comedy? Like was it trying to be funny?
Well, the thing I thought of is he's known for, because he's written plays, in his films, he's very exacting. He wants people to say exactly the lines as he's written them. And normally with a Mamet film, that makes sense. And here, the process. Oh, yeah. David, I'm sorry.
Yes. So immediately for me, I was confused from word 1.
I was very confused, which is perhaps intentional. I happen to know, because of the taglines and other things, that it was a con or heist movie.
Right.
So I was suspicious of everything in that sense. When things didn't make any sense, I thought, oh, well, this is part of the con, right? But even to the very end, and I will say that the ending felt very much like a Deus Ex Machina with... the way it turned out. I was just like, how did all of those people be in the right place at the right time? It kind of didn't make any sense to me at all, other than the writer wants to wrap this up. But even though I knew we were in a con, I still kind of didn't understand. And then when they explained at the end how the con was done, it wasn't like at the end of The Sting or Ocean's 11 where I was like, oh yeah, that's totally cool. It was like, that doesn't really seem like it makes sense. How would they do what? No, huh?
I was super suspicious from the beginning of Rebecca Pidgeon's character, Susan Ricci, because she kept kind of like repeating herself or speaking in a way that it just seemed like, is she supposed to be, I don't know what the word is, but it was almost like her character was speaking to the audience or trying to give us clues, but I never could figure out really what, I couldn't figure anything out.
Yeah, she did. Her dialogue was a little bit odd in two ways. One way that you mentioned there is it almost felt like little Susie was delivering some exposition, but also it was strangely aggressive in some sense.
Yes.
And there is a line when Joe visits, I think, her at her apartment above a bakery or what have you. Mm-hmm. And she says, I'd like you to have for dinner or dinner and breakfast. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that is so forward. It just didn't even make any sense. It didn't, to me, land as like a common like waka waka. And I would think Joe's a smart guy. And of course, if you look like Campbell Scott, maybe people offer to sleep with you all the time. But I felt like with the process, he would be suspicious of this coworker or secretary, or somehow she was at his firm who suddenly wanted to literally jump his bones.
I kept looking for clues and not really ever getting them.
Right.
So I have here under the trivia, I say the con game run in this movie is not The Spanish Prisoner. In that con, as Ed O'Neill explains, it involves the story of an imprisoned wealthy person, and if the Mark provides the money to bribe them out of prison, then the Mark will be richly rewarded. In modern times, this is the source of the common Nigerian prince scam. Besides resembling a long con employing a big store and other sophisticated props, the con depicted in this movie is simply to entice the Mark, Campbell Scott, to remove the process, quote unquote, the process from its secure location to where it could be pilfered with no promised reward of any kind. That was what we said. And so let me finish this thing from IMDb. It says, in this sense, it's more of an elaborate heist, like you said, not a con at all. So he kept going along with people who wronged him. And it was like he was never like, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. And it felt like he was never learning his lesson.
So here's a person that's supposed to be so smart that he thought of a process that no other country could think of, right?
Totally.
Yet he seemed to be a complete rube.
Yeah.
And so some part of it, I say, okay, well, is he the classic boffin with no street smarts? But yes, after people like went through stuff, but even back at the very, very beginning, when Jimmy says, here's this package, would you deliver it to my sister?
Yeah.
Just put it in the post. There's no reason for him to hand carry that.
Right. And he didn't even say like, well, why can't you just mail it to her? Or you live in the city.
This person I just met the other day, like literally less than 24 hours previously. And it was this weird, like, oh, it's my sister and blah, blah. What? Yeah, that didn't even make any sense. So, okay, maybe they're trying to establish that Campbell Scott's character, Joe, was high IQ, low wisdom, just a complete boob. Mm-hmm. But then I kind of feel like
sigh.
I kind of feel like it wouldn't have been able to. And then this whole thing with there's only one copy of the process in the book. I mean, I guess by the premise, by the bit, but I can't imagine any modern company saying like, oh, sure, okay, this employee can have the only copy of this super secret thing. That's generally not how that works.
Especially, I mean, this was, what I say, 97. This is, computers exist, like for corporations.
Yeah. Although that was kind of a hilarious prop, the computer that Jimmy had, which is supposed to be some highfalutin computer. But
right.
So, and the whole kind of way that his office was run, like it was Mad Men era.
Yeah.
It really didn't kind of add up to me.
Right. So I do want to say I'm going to try to focus on the things I did like about this film. Near the 2/3 in, I feel maybe it was about halfway, Steve Martin is showing a picture of him and his sister.
Yes.
And so the sister's identity has been hidden for a while. And I believe Campbell, I can't remember if that's before or after he saw a woman. So Steve picks up this photograph in a frame. And so the audience is like, oh, we're going to get to see what the sister looks like. And, we're always in filmmaking, when we make films, trying to hide the light in reflective surfaces. Mm-hmm. And this is where they use the light because the glare from the key light, because it was a hot light, went right over the sister's face. And I mean, I just thought, oh, that's brilliant.
Well, how many takes did that take for Steve Martin to hold it at the exact right angle? Because that's tough to do.
Right.
But that bumped me, though, because the angle of the camera is different than the angle of Campbell Scott. So Joe would have seen the face.
But
so why do that?
Well, was it just so the audience didn't see?
What is that? What does it matter if the audience sees a picture of his fake sister?
Well, because now, like later, when we see the old lady and they say, yeah, that's Mrs. whoever, then Jimmy Dell, that's Mrs. I don't think they called her Mrs. Dell. She must have gotten married. Anyway, I don't know. I don't know. So, so talking about the things that let's talk about the things we liked.
So I actually generally liked, is it Rebecca Pidgeon? It's Mamet's wife. She plays Susan. I liked her work in State and Maine. And I feel like, she's good on the screen. Campbell Scott, again, he played it very stoic, which I think matches the character, right? He doesn't seem to have a lot of EQ or a lot of engagement, right? Joie de vivre.
No, you're right. He is kind of, because where I first was introduced was Dying Young with Julia Roberts. And I mean, it's a romantic comedy and she falls in love with him. And he's not like Richard Gere charming, like from Pretty Woman. It's like a quiet, but he is, I guess he's very attractive, but he is a little bit of a dud.
He didn't have a lot of pep.
But I really do like his acting, like, because I've seen him in stuff lately. He's usually playing like a cop or a lawyer, or not a cop, but like a detective and a lawyer or different things. Anyway, sorry, sidebar.
So it was it's a less comedic role for Steve Martin. Although I have to be honest, it was difficult to watch this without realizing it was Steve Martin. And I was actually thinking of Dirty Rotten Scoundrels with Steve and Michael Caine.
Right.
And because it's kind of the rich guy on a tropical island, that's where my mind went. So
that would have been a much more entertaining film to watch, but there's a reason we picked this one for this month.
Right.
So.
And I will say to our listeners, boy, this month's going to be hard. I am going to fall out of my chair if y'all get this one.
Without looking at our social media.
Yeah. I mean, but even then, I don't know. But without it would be very, very difficult to do. This is like a Doug Benson, Edgar Wright level.
By the way, this was Mike's idea.
This is my idea. Awesome. I forgot this was my idea. So I'm taking credit for it. Haha, I did this to all of you. So I thought the production value was good.
Yeah.
Right. And the different parts were like the sets were believable. Where it bumped me was when they showed like, oh, that set was really supposedly this thing that Jimmy and his friends had dressed up. And it just didn't seem like it was the same space.
Well, like, okay, so I read in the trivia that they used a lot of signage, and I don't know if it was overt, like, hey, audience, we're going to give you a great big clue here. Like, for example, I think near the beginning of the film. Anyway, when Steve Martin's character asks him to take the package, apparently there's a sign in the airport that says don't accept packages, and they do like a zoom in on it.
Yeah.
And then I thought it was at the beginning of the film is a sign that says someone talked or something. And so they were saying that the signage was used to kind of give the audience clues. I don't know if it worked.
Yeah. This is one of those films where I think the title makes me feel like it started out with the Spanish prisoner con, and then it just somehow morphed through the writing and the production, and it just never kind of found its way.
So for 1997, I think Mamet is I think he's kind of keeps a low profile.
Okay.
I scoured for interviews of him talking about this film, and I could not find any. I couldn't really find Steve Martin talking about it. I mean, I don't know. It was surprising to me that I couldn't find, I'm always searching for, okay,
right.
Explain this to me.
Right. So I made a note under cinematography that there is a close-up of the bolt on the darkroom door. And What that mostly reminded me of was my very own close-up of a light in the ceiling on the elevator. Mm-hmm. It felt like it was covering an edit or something, right?
Right.
And maybe that's it, right? Maybe just when they got in the edit bay and they looked at the footage and like it just didn't come together like Mamet saw it in his head, right?
Right.
And sometimes it happens.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And that's why I was thinking like, was there a producer that kind of threw around their weight and thought, I know, I don't know. It's just, okay.
Did they secretly have Michael Jackson and they had to cut all those scenes and it didn't make any sense? I don't know.
Right. So to stay on the positive.
On the positive.
But did this film have some of our classic categories? Was there head trauma in this film?
I made no note of head trauma.
Okay. Was there any romance? Did we get a smoochie?
Smoochie, smoochie, smoochie. No smoochies recorded by this reporter.
Oh my gosh. Oh.
Even though Susan really tried to smooch Joe.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't a rom-com.
Nope.
But you would think with Susan's character, she either would have made out with Campbell or like Felicity Huffman. Like, why didn't she fall in love with Campbell Scott?
Well, I would have expected the Susan character. I mean, she did try very hard to sleep with him, but he's apparently not interested.
How about a driving review?
Okay, so there was a little bit here. So our first clue that they're not in the U.S. is there's a Mercedes-Benz 280 as a taxi. No place in the U.S. uses Mercedes for taxis, but outside the U.S., they're ubiquitous. They're like Fords. They're everywhere. Mm-hmm. But during the scene where Joe or Jimmy is supposedly shopping for a high-end car, there's a 1948 Lagonda 2.6 liter, which is perhaps the only Lagonda in the movies. Never heard of one of those before. Never seen one. I'm sure that Wayne Carrillo from Chasing Classic Cars is spitting his coffee out right now and knows all about them. But that's a car we never see in the movies. So that was interesting. But the highlight has to be there's a 1959 green Studebaker Scotsman truck that is in the driveway and where Joe and Jimmy have an argument with across the hood, basically. And it's a great prop to have in the middle of that argument. Really enjoyed that.
Shall we go to the numbers?
Let's go to the numbers.
All right. The budget for this film was $10 million, and that's exactly what it made domestically. And worldwide, it only brought in 13.8, and that includes the domestic. So they only got less than $4 million from the rest of the world. Mm-hmm. And adjusted for inflation today, that would be like 19.8. So if you throw in, I don't know if marketing costs were as high in 97, but this was not a successful film, which I had never heard of it.
Yeah, I think the studio probably did put a lot of advertising on this one.
Right. IMDb gives it a 7.2 out of 10, and Rotten Tomatoes gives it, critics give it an 89%, and audiences are only a little bit less than that at 81%.
Huh?
I know. And I did find in my research an episode of Siskel and Ebert, and they were talking about it, and they both loved it and said it was like the best film of the year.
What?
I know. I don't.
Did we get some sort of weird cut?
We got punked.
Yeah, we did.
It's the Spanish con.
Okay, I hope all of our listeners find the version that Siskel and Ebert watched.
Okay. It's just under 2 hours at an hour and 50 minutes. It's rated PG. It is listed as a drama mystery thriller, which it was, I would say.
Yeah.
Magnolia Films is the studio that brought it to us, and Mamet was nominated for best screenplay at the Independent Spirit Awards.
Yeah,
so a lot of people liked it other than us.
I'm missing something. I just feel like I missed something that other people responded to.
I know.
Yeah.
The filming locations, Florida subbed in for, I think, a Caribbean island, and New York and Boston were the other two locations. So we watched it on Peacock for free. So that was a plus. Free. So we picked this one because it fit in with our theme. So that's what happened there. This was episode 112. We hope that send us in what you guys, if you've ever seen this movie, please tell us, like, if we missed something, please share with us what we missed. And never forget,
Dodges never stop, and neither do the movies.
Thanks for listening to Dodge Movie Podcast with Christy and Mike Dodge of Dodge Media Productions. To find out more about this podcast and what we do, go to dodgemediaproductions.com. Subscribe, share, leave a comment, and tell us what we should watch next. Dodges never stop, and neither do the movies.